Am I live? Okay. Dr. Johnson to Mr. Boswell. Dear Sir, I make haste to write again, lest my last letter should give you too much pain. If you are really oppressed with overpowering and involuntary melancholy, I almost said melancholy, you are to be pitied rather than reproached. Now, my dear Bozzy, let us have done with quarrels and with censure. Let me know whether I have not sent you a pretty library. There are perhaps many books among them which you never need read through, but there are none which it is not proper for you to know, and sometimes to consult. Of these books, of which the use is only occasional, it is often sufficient to know the contents, that, when any question arises, you may know where to look for information. I have to say, I'd be pretty flattered if Johnson sent me a library as a present. Since I wrote, I have looked over Mr. McLaurin's plea and think it excellent. How is the suit carried on if by subscription I commission you to contribute in my name what is proper? Let nothing be wanting in such a case. Dr. Drummond, I see, is superseded. His father would have grieved, but he lived to obtain the pleasure of his son's election and died before that pleasure was abated. There's a footnote here about Dr. Drummond. The son of Johnson's old friend, Mr. William Drummond. See page 376, 379. I'm not going to do that, but I do remember that guy's name. He was a young man of such distinguished merit that he was nominated to one of the medical professorships of the College of Edinburgh without solicitation while he was at Naples. Having other views, he did not accept of the honor and soon afterwards died. Langston's lady has brought him a girl and both are well. I dined with him the other day. ... So there's lots of ellipses in this one, so I'm guessing Boswell's not including the entire letter. It vexes me to tell you that on the evening of the 29th of May, I was seized by the gout, and I am not quite well. The pain has not been violent, but the weakness and tenderness were very troublesome, and what is said to be very uncommon, it has not alleviated my other disorders. Make use of youth and health. While you have them, make my compliments to Mrs. Boswell. I am, my dear sir, your most affectionate, July 6, 1776, Sam Johnson. Mr. Boswell to Dr. Johnson, Edinburgh, July 18, 1776. My dear sir, your letter of the 2nd of the month was rather a harsh medicine, but I was delighted with that spontaneous tenderness which, a few days afterwards, sent forth such balsam as your next brought me. I found myself for some time so ill that all I could do was to preserve a decent appearance, while all within was weakness and distress. Like a reduced garrison that had some spirit left, I hung out flags and planted all the force I could muster upon the walls. I am now much better, and I sincerely thank you for your kind attention and friendly counsel. Count Minucci came here last week from traveling in Ireland. I have shown him what civilities I could on his own account, on yours, and on that of Mr. and Mrs. Thrale. He has had a fall from his horse and been much hurt. I regret this unlucky accident, for he seemed to be a very amiable man. Footnote here about Count Minucci, a Florentine nobleman mentioned by Johnson in his notes of his tour in France. I had the pleasure of becoming acquainted with him in London in the spring of this year. As the evidence of what I have mentioned at the beginning of this year, I select from his private register the following passage. July 25th, 1776. O God, who hast ordained that whatever is to be desired should be sought by labor, and who by thy blessing bringest honest labor to good effort, look with mercy upon my studies and endeavors. Grant me, O Lord, to design only what is lawful and right, and afford me calmness of mind and steadiness of purpose, that I may so do thy will in this short life as to obtain happiness in the world to come. For the sake of Jesus Christ, our Lord. Amen. It appears from a note subjoined that this was composed when Johnson proposed to apply vigorously to study, particularly of the Greek and Italian tongues. Such a purpose, so expressed at the age of 67, is admirable and encouraging, and it must impress all the thinking part of my readers with a consolatory confidence and habitual devotion, when they see a man of such large intellectual powers as Johnson, thus in the genuine earnestness of secrecy, imploring the aid of the Supreme Being, from whom cometh down every good and every perfect gift. A letter here to Sir Joshua Reynolds. Sir, a young man whose name is Patterson offers himself this evening to the Academy. He is the son of a man from whom I have long had a kindness, and who is now abroad in distress. Not abroad in distress, abroad in distress. I shall be glad that you will be pleased to show him any little countenance, or pay him any small distinction. How much it is in your power to favor or to forward a young man I do not know, nor do I know how much this candidate deserves favor by his personal merit, or what I hope his proficiency may now give of future eminence. I recommend him as the son of my friend. Your character and station enable you to give a young man great encouragement by very easy means. You have heard of a man who asked no other favor of Sir Robert Walpole than that he would bow to him as at his levee. I am, sir, your most humble servant. August 3rd, 1776. Sam Johnson. Mr. Boswell to Dr. Johnson, Edinburgh, October 30th, 1776. In brackets here. After giving him an account of my having examined the chests of books which he had sent to me, and which contain what may be truly called a numerous and miscellaneous stall library, thrown together at random, I said, Lord Hales was against the decree in the case of my client, the minister. Now that he justified the minister, but not because he justified the minister, but because the parishioner both provoked and retorted. I sent his lordship your amiable argument upon the case for his perusal. His observation upon it in the letter to me was this. Dr. Johnson's suasorium is pleasantly and artfully composed. I suspect, however, that he has not convinced himself, for I believe that he is better read in ecclesiastical history than to imagine that a bishop or a presbyter has a right to begin censure or discipline a cathedra. Okay, there's 3 footnotes here. One for suasorium. It says pleading. I guess that's just what, so Dr. Johnson's pleading is pleasantly. There's a footnote for pleasantly. Why his lordship uses the epithet pleasantly when speaking of a grave piece of reasoning, I cannot conceive, but different men have different notions of pleasantry. I happened to sit by a gentleman one evening at the Opera House in London who, at the moment when Medea appears to be in great agony at the thought of killing her children, turned to me with a smile and said, funny enough. That's pretty good. And then there's another footnote after cathedra. Dr. Johnson afterwards told me that he was of opinion that a clergyman had this right. Okay, so if you remember a couple days ago, Johnson wrote a, what I called an SAT essay on clergyman's right to talk bad about one of his parishioners, because I think the parishioner was suing the clergyman. Anyway, back to the Boswell letter. For the honor of Count Minucci, as well as to observe that exactness of truth which you have taught me, I must correct what I said in a former letter. He did not fall from his horse, which might have been an imputation on his skill as an officer of cavalry. His horse fell with him. I have, since I saw you, read every word of Gragner's biographical history. It has entertained me exceedingly, and I do not think him the Whig that you supposed. Horace Walpole's being his patron is, indeed, no good sign of his political principles, but he denied to Lord Mountstuart that he was a Whig, and said he had been accused by both parties of partiality. And seems he was like Pope, while Tories call me Whig, and Whig's a Tory. I wish you would look more into his book, and as Lord Mountstuart wishes much to find a proper person to continue the work upon Granger's plan, and has desired I would mention it to you, if such a man occurs, please to let me know. His lordship will give him a generous encouragement. That's the end of that letter. Next one, to Mr. Robert Levitt. Dear sir, having spent about 6 weeks at this place, we have at length resolved upon returning. I expect to see you all in Fleet Street on the 30th of this month. I did not go into the sea till last Friday, but think to go most of this week, though I know not that it does me any good. My nights are very restless and tiresome, but I am otherwise well. I've written word of my coming to Mrs. Williams. Remember me kindly to Francis and Betsy. I am, sir, your humble servant, Brighthelmstone, October 21st, 1776. Sam Johnson. Footnote here. For this and Dr. Johnson's other letters to Mr. Levitt, I am indebted to my old acquaintance, Mr. Nathaniel Thomas, whose worth and ingenuity have been long known to a respectable, though not a wider circle, and whose collection of medals would do credit to persons of greater opulence. I again wrote to Dr. Johnson on the 21st of October, informing him that my father had, in the most liberal manner, paid a large debt for me, and that I had now the happiness of being on very good terms with him. Well, that'll help. And to which he returned the following answer. To James Boswell, Esquire. Dear sir, I had great pleasure in hearing that you are at last on good terms with your father. Cultivate his kindness by all honest and manly means. Life is but short. No time can be afforded but for the indulgence of real sorrow, or contest upon questions seriously momentous. Let us now throw away any of our days upon useless resentment, or contend who shall hold out longest in stubborn malignity. It is best not to be angry, and best in the next place to be quickly reconciled. May you and your father pass the remainder of your time in reciprocal benevolence. Do you ever hear from Mr. Langton? I visit him sometimes, but he does not talk. I do not like his scheme of life. But as I am not permitted to understand it, I cannot see anything right that is wrong. His children are sweet babies. I hope my irreconcilable enemy, Mrs. Boswell, is well. Desire her not to transmit her malevolence to the young people. Let me have Alexander and Veronica and Euphemia for my friends. Mrs. Williams, whom you may reckon as one of your well-wishers, is in a feeble and languishing state, with little hope of growing better. She went for some part of the autumn into the country, but is little benefited. And Dr. Lawrence confesses that his art is at an end. Death is, however, at a distance. And what more than that can we say of ourselves? I am sorry for her pain, and more sorry for her decay. Mr. Levitt is sound, wind, and limb. I was some weeks this autumn at Brighthelmstone. The place was very dull, and I was not well. The expedition to the Hebrides was the most pleasant journey that I ever made. Such an effort annually would give the world a little diversification. Every year, however, we cannot wander, and must therefore endeavor to spend our time at home as well as we can. I believe it is best to throw life into a method, that every hour may bring its employment, and every employment have its hour. Xenophon observes in his treatise on oceanomy that if everything be kept in a certain place, when anything is worn out or consumed, the vacuity which it leaves will show what is wanting. So if every part of time has its duty, the hour will carry into remembrance its proper engagement. I have not practiced this prudence myself, but I have suffered much for want of it. And I would have you, by timely recollection and steady resolution, escape from those evils which have laid heavy upon me. I am, my dearest Boswell, your most humble servant. Bolt Court, November 16, 1776. Sam Johnson. On the 16th of November, I informed Johnson that Mr. Strahan had sent me 12 copies of the Journey to the Western Islands, handsomely bound, instead of the 20 copies which were stipulated, but which I suppose were to be only in sheets. Requested to know how they should be distributed, and mentioned that I had another son born to me, who was named David, and was a sickly infant. To James Boswell, Esquire. Dear Sir, I have been for some time ill of a cold, which perhaps I made an excuse to myself for not writing, when in reality I knew not what to say. The books you must at last distribute as you think best, in my name or your own, as you are inclined, or as you judge most proper. Everybody cannot be obliged, but I wish that nobody may be offended. Do the best you can. I congratulate you on the increase of your family and hope that little David is by this time well and his mamma perfectly recovered. I am much pleased to hear of the reestablishment of kindness between you and your father. Cultivate his paternal tenderness as much as you can. To live at variance at all is uncomfortable. Besides that, in the whole dispute you have the wrong side. At least you gave the first provocations, and some of them very offensive. Let it now be all over. As you have no reason to think that your new mother has shown you any foul play, treat her with respect and with some degree of confidence. This will secure your father. When once a discordant family has felt the pleasure of peace, they will not willingly lose it. If Mrs. Boswell should be but friends with me, we might now shut the temple of Janus. What came of Dr. Memsey's case, or cause? Is the question about the Negro determined? Has Sir Alan any reasonable hope? What has become of poor Macquarie? Let me know the event of all these litigations. I wish particularly well to the Negro and Sir Alan. Mrs. Williams has been much out of order, and though she is something better, is likely, in her physician's opinion, to endure her malady for life, though she may perhaps die of some other. Mrs. Thrale is big and fancies that she carries a boy. If it were very reasonable to wish her much about it, I should wish her not to be disappointed. The desire of male heirs is not appendant only to feudal tenures. A son is almost necessary to the continuance of Thrale's fortune. For what can Mrs. do with a brewhouse? Lands are fitter for daughters than trades. Bretty went away from Thrale's in some whimsical fit of disgust or ill nature without taking any leave. It is well if he finds it in any other place as good as habitation, and as many conveniences. He has got 25 guineas by translating Sir Joshua's discourses into Italian, and Mrs. Thrale gave him 100 in the spring, so that he is yet in no difficulties. Coleman has bought Foot's patent and is to allow Foot for life £1,600 a year, as Reynolds told me, and to allow him to play so often on some such terms that he may again £400 more. He may gain £400 more. What Coleman can get by this bargain but trouble and hazard I do not see. I am, dear sir, your humble servant, December 21st, 1776, Sam Johnson. All right. Well, those were some good letters. I enjoyed them. Till next time, bye from Boswell. And stream.